So to open the controller, I have the controller flipped over, like you can see right here, and I'm using a 2mm Allen wrench. So the Allen is the little hexagonal deal, and I'm going to come into these screws. Now, just one thing, I'm going to say this right now as a reminder. When you go to pull these screws out, that's fine. It's great to pull them out, no problem. But when you go to put them back in, remember not to over-tighten them, because the way the threaded inserts are in the lip, if you over-tighten, you can actually do damage to the insert, and it'll spin in place and you won't be able to get it out. So just be wary, be careful of that. Now there are a total of 2 screws on each side, so you've got a total of 8 screws all the way around, 2, 4, 6, 8. So I'm just going to take a minute here and get all those screws out, and we'll pop it open. Okay, so I've got all the screws out of the controller now, and I'm just going to pop it open. You can see I got a lot of light wires there. If you have a bite switch, be careful, because you are still attached. That's the bite switch that's there. In particular though, if you could take a look in here, we're looking at the analogs. So you can see your analogs might be positioned a little bit different based on what controller you have, but these are called potentiometers on each side. So when I move the joystick, like this joystick, if you look, if I'm moving left and right here, that's using this potentiometer here. So that would be what would be considered the x-axis. Up and down, vertical, going up and down is going to turn this potentiometer. So what happens sometimes, whether it's from dropping it or in transit or just bad luck, one of these little wires may come off of one of these. There's 3 poles on each and 3 wires connected to each potentiometer. There's a red and a black and a colored one in between. So if you're having a symptom where, like for example, you start up a first-person shooter game and the guy is constantly turning in one direction, that's probably because either the red or the black is pulled out on one side of the analog. So you just got to look at both the analogs. So you have 4 total potentiometers, 12 total wires to check out, and make sure you've got a good connection to the potentiometer. Once you find, and that's most likely 9 times out of 10, that's what happened. And we do put hot glue there to try to hold it in. It's possible the hot glue's not there. We didn't always do hot glue, so if you have an older controller, it might be the hot glue's not there, so it's not a bad idea if you're going to go ahead and do this. And once you get the cables put onto the connectors, and I'm just zooming here, I'll show you kind of what it looks like. These are hot glued together because they're done right. And if I pull on them, you can see these are actually 3 separate cables, and they've got this little connector on the end, which just really slips onto these little solder pads, right? Just like this. Now, if you go to put it on and it's really loose, like it's falling off, it's not a bad idea to get a tool, something that can pinch, and just gently, like here I've got a pair of needle nose pliers, and all I'm going to do is, if you look at that little opening there, I'm just going to kind of squeeze it down a little bit so it's a little bit tighter, and that's going to create some more friction, so when it goes on the tab, it'll hold a lot tighter. Now, another thing I will say about this, you got to be careful to not, once you get them on, to not wiggle back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, because these little metal tabs here that are on here can break if you wiggle them too much. So you definitely want to just be gentle with them. But like, if you pull on the wire a little bit, see, is that holding? Is that holding? Is that holding? Yeah, they're holding pretty well, so I don't need to tighten them anymore. But that's basically what I recommend for connecting it. And just while you've got it open, go ahead and check both sides of the analogs, make sure they're all properly connected, and then you're ready to close it back up. Now, if you did find one that was disconnected, a little bit of hot glue isn't a bad idea. If you saw where we had a little hot glue on the top, do not take a bunch of hot glue and kind of dump it. You don't want to get hot glue inside of the potentiometer. You want to keep it all on the outside on the connectors themselves. Don't get a big glob in here, because if hot glue falls in there, it can actually hinder the potentiometer from moving with the stick, and then the analog is basically ruined and you're going to have to replace it. So speaking of analogs, if the analog is bad and you need a part, it is pretty easy to change the analogs if you've got to completely replace them, and I can go through that really quick. If you look at the front of the controller, if we look here, you can actually, there's a couple ways, but if you look, there's a little tab here, and you kind of find this little open spot, and you pop that up, and then you got 4 screws to remove. It's a very small screwdriver and small screws, but you'd remove those 4 screws, pop the old analog out, put the new analog in, and bam, you got a new analog. So it is easy to service as far as that goes, because it's just 4 screws, obviously plus opening it. But you can see, I've got it back together right now. That's like on its case, and then this is the frame that you took off. Now, in most cases, axis 4 is an exception, but in most cases, when you go to put it back together, the part that has the negative relief here, that's towards the bottom. And then all you're going to do is like pop it back together, right? Flip it back over, and then you got to kind of work it, because this is a flexible ABS bottom, so you kind of got to work it over and make sure that you get to it. Like, I like these. You can see I got it right there on the end and kind of hold it on. Now, when you go to put them back in, and this is important, rather than just grinding it in clockwise, do a little bit of counterclockwise action until you feel it kind of click. You can hear that just clicked, and then you know your threads are lined up, and then go forward. You know, the problem is if you go to drive this in quickly, and they're aluminum inserts, so you know, and this is steel, and steel is stronger and harder than aluminum, so it can actually strip the threads. But if you look on this, I mean, these are pressed in, they're press fit into the plastic. So you can see why if you were to like really tighten down on these and pull on it, you could potentially pull these out of the plastic, and you don't want to do that. So just be mindful of that, and when you go to actually put it in, again, you're going to do a counterclockwise turn until you feel a click, and then forward, and then you're guaranteed that get it back the way it was originally. I hope this helps. If you have any questions, shoot me an email at cgirding at gravityignite.com or Chris at Blue Tip Gaming. Thank you very much for your time.